Hey guys, how's it going? It's Chris here, and I wanted to quickly go over a story that I had an idea for about like another side character, another Tuffle, one that we never see or hear of in the story in any of the books that are published or were published at the time. But it was just an idea that I had. It was a couple scenes that I thought of, and I thought, oh yeah, that'd be a pretty cool, interesting Tuffle story, and it kind of wraps into the end of book one. So I will say ding. I will say spoiler for book one. Okay, spoiler for the ending, not characters or whatever have you, but spoiler for the ending. So get that out of the way. So this is a story about a boy. Fuck, I can't. This is a story about. I can't do it without thinking of that fucking song. So a boy named Nicholas, who was about 17, and he previously, before we join him in the story, his backstory is like living as a vagabond with his best friend and his sister. His parents took in the best friend, but things between the family dynamic kind of fell apart, and the three of them ran away to be on their own. I didn't have a whole lot of backstory behind that, but like that's just the setup for where they are. And they've been kind of traveling, whatever, on their own for about a year. Um, Nicholas has anger issues, which always put tension on the group, which also contributed to the family dynamic breaking apart. And after so long of the anger issues persisting between the three of them, living out on the road and stuff, the best friend and sister abandon him. They kind of figure out that they have a thing for each other and that his issues are just too much to deal with, and he gets, clouded and he just kind of rages out, and they abandon him. So after that, he's alone and furious, and his emotions are so like out of control, just so unmoderated that Sin is able to detect him and approaches, and he gives him a tuffle. Under whatever stipulations, under whatever connotations, I don't exactly know. Like, yeah, he's mad. He's not so mad to just want to go out and murder them, but he's still mad at them. But it's still enough to where, like, Sin's like, yeah, dude, I can help you out. I can give you some kind of power. The people will never leave you again with this kind of thing. The Tuffle's name is Rhi, and he ends up hunting down and killing his best friend and sister. He essentially was. Why is everyone texting me right now? Jesus. Um, Rhea is essentially tricking him to being like, yeah, I can help you find them, and then you can talk, you can get your answers and whatever have you, and then obviously helps him track them down and goes ballistic when his anger is a little too high. Rhea's like, oh, that's my anger and my body now, and then just fucking rips him apart. And after he kills him, he's obviously stricken with regret. Now, their story is kind of like Kim's story in the sense of, you know, I did this thing and it's not corrupting me the way it should. I am resilient to the anima effects, and I do not want to continue doing this. Kind of like, we saw a few people like that. We saw Lyumic and Lucy, who Lucy was just like, nah, son, and got herself shot. Sorry, spoilers for Hebeloma, but no one's going to read that. You have like Ken and Magcrow, where that wasn't their thing. That was their unique side, where Ken and Magcrow were both on the good side, and Kim and Alice obviously had their disagreements, but whatever. And this is definitely one where it's like the humans like, I can't do this, and the Tuff was like, yeah, you go and do this. So, but yeah, knowing that he's a monster, the story gets even more dark, and he um, basically is constantly trying to kill himself. Most of the time, he tried to kill himself with like fucking, I think he stole a bunch of pills from like a gas station or something like that, and was downing a bunch of pills, and that didn't kill him because the Tuffle was keeping him alive. And he eventually got to a point where he just trigger warning was just I should have said that first, but he just ends up like cutting his wrists a whole lot of times and just lets himself bleed out, and the Tuffle just like screwing with him, trying to like drive him kind of insane so we can use him in a mentally debilitated way, lets him get really close to death, and then like goes into overdrive and heals him and brings him back from the brink. um, so yeah, and we learn of his past because we would join the story as he's like recovering from bleeding out again for like whatever. There's a thing in here I'll read, but we learn about his past because he is always reliving those moments in his nightmares, and they're super vivid because of the Tuffle energy. So he's like living it like it's happening, and yeah, so he just as he's living those moments in his last moments before the Tuffle resuscitates him essentially, and then he's alive again. And he's pretty much so tired and so drained that the Tuffle is able to take him over after he recovers and try to get him as close as he can to killing more people. But when Nicholas regains control before he can kill anybody, he separates himself far enough away to where it makes it harder for the Tuffle to hunt anybody, while he inevitably can either kill himself or knows that he'll be unconscious while recovering. So I have some random stuff. Like, I have a whole bunch of random notes here. It says shaken, sick. He and Nicholas asks how many this time, and the Tuffle answers 7. And then he asks how many more attempts until you realize we may only die gloriously in battle. How many more innocent people will suffer from your selfishly suicidal ambition? So he has accidentally killed people. Um, there's a little note that says reflection of his purple eyes and a silver blade, and like whatever knife he's holding, he's just looking at his eyes reflecting as he's getting ready to cut into himself. Here's a quote that the Tuffle says: "You'll be slicing into yourself for hours with no guarantee. With no guarantee that I won't just keep healing you. I know you don't have the strength to compete with me, and you should give it up." Then there's like a little opening thing right here. It says, "Throughout my life," I know you guys can't see it. It's because I have it up on my email. You don't need to be seeing my email. He says, "Throughout my life, I've been constantly surprised by the new inventive ways a person could hit rock bottom, how it always seems to get lower and lower. Unfortunately, the years of trauma and character building couldn't come close to this." The dull silver blade, tightly gripped in my right hand, vibrated with the taut coursing blood in my veins. I couldn't take my eyes off the gleaming silver. Moreover, the reflection had aimed back at me. My asthma seeped under my skin, baking gory memories into the cartilage of my fingers, weakening the resolve I desperately clung to end this nightmare. One good cut should be enough, just one, but my muscles were not strictly under my command. And then there's another quote. These are not necessarily in order. Again, these are all just random notes I was taking as I was coming up with the story. Quote: "It didn't matter how well you. It didn't matter how well you cleaned this blade. You can't wash the sin of their deaths, and can't wash the reflection of who we are. All you can do is thicken the crimson. Think about it. Relive the way they squirmed as I peeled their skin off and ate it in front of them. I want you to try. I want you to experience just how hopeless it is. You are mine forever." Yeah, and then the last thing I have written was, essentially, the structure is every time he passes out, inch closer to death before the Tuffle revives him, he relives the trauma that led him here, and all the while that trauma is fueling the Tuffle to take over the unconscious body and kind of trudge forward. But with the body being unconscious, he has difficulty moving, so he's kind of like dragging like a half calcified body because the human is fully unconscious. Yeah, and at the end, and then the story would wrap up. At the end, he gets so close to actually killing himself that the Tuffle is having a hard time, well, reviving him. But like he's still on the brink. But like whatever. So the Tuffle's like, okay, shit. But at that time where he is bleeding himself dry, Sin dies, and this is taking place within the time period of Kim being around doing her things. So Sin dies, and then the Tuffle start to die. The anima start to crack. And because there's so much strain that the anima's gone through of constantly using energy to revive him and to deal with him and to manipulate him, the anima shatters pretty quickly. And that burst sends like a final wave of like, and not cleansing energy, but energy that his body was so accustomed to using that it did repair his injury enough to where he was no longer on the brink of death. He was still close, and he still almost died from it. But the fact that his Tuffle died inside of him, and he survived that, because that's an unusual thing. If the Tuffle dies inside, the human typically would die, but they weren't very intertwined. Their souls were not that close together. He hadn't sapped Nicholas's soul enough. And like I said, with the cycle that they have been going through about him constantly regenerating him because of all this, he was able to take some of that and survive. So he stops himself once he realizes that the Tuffle is dead inside him, and he actually picks himself back up and saves himself and starts over. So yeah, that was the story I wrote. That was a story I came up with in my head, and I didn't do anything with yet. It's just conceptual, and it's possible that I could write it, but like it wouldn't really add too much to the universe outside of showing how things can go when Sin dies. But I don't know. So yeah, that was that little side story. I hope it was interesting enough to you guys. It was morbid as fuck, But yeah, I don't know what else to say. I have chicken noodle soup that's getting cold. Have a good night. Gesundheit.